frosty conditions going. What we thought we'd do this Friday is go through a little bit, so we've got all the drivers lined up on the side there, go through a couple of shots with each one and just explain what we're seeing with them in kind of early testing. So we've got some of the latest models, got the Stealth 2s, got the ParaDyms, 430s, the AeroJet Cobras, Titleist TSRs and the Mizuno the ST-Z, or ST-Z, depending where you're from. And just give literally a couple of shots with each, but give some insights into what each of them does, but what we're finding with them in studio to date. So, just a bit of a guide on whether a certain head style is proving to be particularly good at one thing or another. I mean, one of the things we're definitely seeing this year is their low spin. So, across the board, when we were out in the States, the language about driver construction, updates in tech this year, they're all talking very similar language. So, interestingly enough, there is a strong tendency across all the brands that spin on drivers has dropped, and I've always played you've had to play a very low loft, and had to play a low spin head to keep the flight under control, which, and some of you might rightly say is that technique rather than tech, and certainly has been. But we are seeing more players going into more standard model heads rather than the low spin versions. So thought we'd just kind of give that bit of a run through. Feel free to fire as many questions as you like in. The more questions, the better. James is waving from behind the screen. James will update me with questions as they come through, and we can answer them as they go. So hopefully I won't expire as we hit these. I don't hit this many balls normally, but we'll say a couple of shots with each. We won't go overboard with them, and look at some of the data. So going to start off with the Titleist. They're a very kind of I guess one would argue historically very safe head. I'm going to start with TSR2. So TSR2 weight back, one of the bigger of the heads, really designed for a bit of stability, consistency. This has been a very consistent performing head. Definitely a little bit lower launching than previous models, and the TSI definitely kicked it up a little bit more. And it's been noticeable that James is producing the glare, been noticeable that the flight's come down a little bit with this model, but quite a good start point because it's a fairly neutral flight. So this isn't going to be a video live about me seeing how far I can hit it. I'm going to be putting on some very kind of standard swings, just sort of fairly smooth swings, just to try and get as much consistency from me as possible to compare with the models. So we'll start off with this. So this is generally a head I'll go to as a base point. If we're looking for something, a very neutral start point, this is quite a good place to start. Very neutral looks, kind of mid-launch, and then on the mid side on spin historically as well. So we'll get a bit of a marker with this. And what I've done is all these heads are as close as possible on weight. This is my same shaft, the graphite design, the Toro DXC6. It's the same shaft that I use in my own club. And I've weighed every single head to be as close as possible to mine where I can. A couple of them are very slightly heavier, but as close as possible to my spec as I can. So we're really comparing the heads as much as possible. And they're all the 9 degrees, again, where we can. If there are any others, I'll update as we go through. So let's use this as a bit of a marker point. Slightly higher on the face. Good start though. Let's turn that T down a fraction. So one of the things with this head, so misstrike, so we see ball speed drop, but dispersion-wise, very, very strong. This is where TSI was very good. TSR is proving to be the same. If I can catch it a little less high on the face. Still, T needs to go down just a little bit more. It should just be the one more. So not quite as misstruck as the first one. So upper mid launch, because I call it a little above centre, but you can see how stable that spin is. Depending on which screen James is showing at the moment, the 2,300 on the spin, there's just a bit of a drop off in ball speed from the strike point. But from a shot shape point of view, having really not being completely centred, very, very stable. I'll give it one more. Little held off. So I'm going to say mid, upper mid launch. I added a bit of loft to that, but you can see the spins stayed very, very consistent. So whilst they weren't right out the middle, efficiency, there's a little bit more to go. That's more user area than head, but actually the stability of where that spin is great. So actually, as far as heads go, as I said earlier, a lot of the heads now are really pretty low spin. This one falls into that kind of safe middle ground. So always a good kind of mean point to work from. The spin is a number that you'll hear me talking about quite a lot as we go through. But make note of that one, we're in the kind of the mid to low 2000s on spin, upper mid launch. So good head for neutral launch, mid to lower mid spin, but very, 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 very stable and consistent. So I'm now going to go TSR3. So keeping the same family, but a little more compact, so slightly more compact shape. TSR3 there. So slightly more compact shape, a little bit shorter front to back, slightly deeper head. One of the strengths of this head has been it's not massively low spin. So that might sound like a bit of an odd comment to make, but actually and as we go through this will have more relevance, but as we go through there are so many heads that we're seeing this year where there is very little spin on, that actually for someone who creates a lot of launch, but doesn't necessarily want to bring the launch angle down, but doesn't necessarily want to knuckle spin off, you can do it with this head. You can get base loft down, but without the spin falling out the sky.
Simon, good morning, Steve from Arizona.
Ah.
Yeah,
very early start.
Nice to see we're reaching parts
and
of the globe.
who are you supporting in Super Bowl, by the way, because that's out with you soon.
Okay, so a Titleist rep told me that if you hit it in the centre consistently, the TSR3 fits you better than TSR2. If you miss the centre, then TSR2 fits you better than TSR3. What are your thoughts?
So depending on I don't know how audible that is, but let us know if you couldn't hear James speaking then. TSR3, yeah, technically being a little bit smaller is a bit less forgiving. The traditional shape, a lot of the higher speed, the kind of old school players like the shape of it. Because the weight's set a little further back in the TSR2, that off-centre resists twisting a little bit more, holds the head a little more stable, so just retains that left to right dispersion a little bit more. So yeah, certainly as a sort of a base principle, TSR2 is a little more forgiving and is going to be a bit better off-centre. So if you're more strike accurate, you're more likely to get a bit more out of the TSR3. I would put it that way around rather than the TSR2 is going to save you more. I think if you're centred strike more, then TSR3 will feel a little bit more solid, being a bit more compact, and you're not going to have the drop off, as TSR2 will maintain performance a little bit more. Yeah, I hope that answered the question the right way. But do let us know who you want to win the Super Bowl, seeing as that is this weekend. Busy time in Phoenix with the TPC being played as well. So this should, in theory, should launch a little bit lower. Little bit. But as you can see, what you can see from this is spin pretty similar. So clearly just missing the centre a little bit, just a bit of a drop off in ball speed there. But I think that's, the Titleist heads are very, what one could call safe heads. They're not going to massively knuckle spin. Okay, TSR4, yes, low spin. So that one is the exception. But TSR2 and 3, very, very safe for spin. They're definitely much better off centre than Titleist have been in the past. So it's certainly a little bit more of a solid feel. That one I got a little bit toe side. That one's then dropped the spin a little bit more. So that is an example of what Steve was talking about, is from a consistency point of view, TSR2 will not have the variations in spin in the same way that the smaller head will, where what happens is as the head distorts a little bit more off centre, there's a bit more gearing on the ball and it knuckles the spin off a little bit more. Now, technically that's going to run out further. So you could say, well, at that launch angle, if you're just trying to bomb it, is that a bad thing? The other aspect is the feel. Feel off the TSR3 is going to be a little bit more solid, and I guess the more centred strike you get, that might just feel like you got a bit more guts, a bit more behind the ball at impact, more old school. A little low on the face, so that'll spin. Yeah, that was a rotter of a strike. So that's low heel, which is horrendous. So you can see off centre, punished more. There's consistency of the flight on the TSR2, that little bit more. So TSR3, yes, just demands a little more centred contact. But when it's good, very good. But say not a low spin bomber. It's only strike point that creates the low spin. Out the centre, it's a very neutral spin profile. So it is a head that we've used to not take the spin too low. Particularly if someone has a bit of a draw shape bias to them. As a head, it's worked well to not create that nosedivey flight. So then going to go up to, we've got a TSR1 in this week. Now, we've only got the 10 degree. We haven't got the 9 degree head yet. That's not as part of the main demo pack. So what I'm going to do is turn this down as much as I can. So what I've also had to do with this head, the base weight is a little bit lighter. So TSR1, if I can release the thread, TSR1 is geared towards lightweight and as much speed as possible, and a little bit more spin, a little bit more flight and spin. There we go. So should expect to see this kick up a little bit more. I've had to add a bit more weight to the head to get it to balance. But let's say design really, be interesting to see where it flights up, but designed really for a lower speed player in principle, or someone who needs to retain a bit of spin. So it's a head that in the past Nelly Corder's used. Again, keeping a little bit of spin on it. It's definitely got a little bit more depth to the head. Visually, very, very similar. When you're looking at it, you could easily confuse this with TSR2 from a visual point of view, other than the grey on the toe and heel here. But slightly more elongated at the back, so visually a little bit more depth to it. But still a very kind of simple, clean Titleist head. Got right under that. Story of the day today. Definitely with the weight back, we'll see this with one of the other heads as well. With the weight further back, it does swing a little bit differently. With how much weight's being moved around the heads now, they do feel different to swing, and they do create slightly more progression in terms of release patterns of how the player reacts to that weight and delivers it. So let's try. Okay, better hit. So better hit there. Yeah, so perfect example there of nicely hit, similar kind of efficiency to the other two heads, but the spin is noticeably up by, for me that's up 600 revs. Now granted, we've maybe exaggerated the weight of the back a little bit more to get it to the same weight as the others, which will affect that slightly. Very, very stable, but a head that you can retain some spin on, which, again, spin being the theme this year, there's a lot of very low spin drivers around. So actually, as a head to retain a bit of flight and spin, it's not like Titleist made this a draw bias head, but a good head from that point of view. So that is Titleist. So I'm going to move on to one that some people might not necessarily think of too much. The Mizuno, the ST-230Z, or ST-Z230. So we had a good chat with Chris Voschel at the trade show in Orlando regarding this. Mizuno have, with their own admittance, been sort of underplayed themselves with regard to drivers and wood performance over the years. This one, definitely a bit of a jump forward. They're shouting about it a little bit more. They've definitely put a little bit more tech into it. That Cortex chamber there, really gone for ball speed retention across the face. Visually, classic Mizuno. It's a very classic rounded shape with the weave, the carbon on the crown, on the top there, the carbon in the back, quite distinctive looking, which is going to, some people will like, some people won't. But it's quite a simple shape. There's not an awful lot going on with it, which, it's something that more and more of our clients actually like. So the other bit, which we'll see across some of the others, is the running bird, the marker on the top, which if I hold that right, is that visible? Is relatively centered. So with some of the other heads, we're seeing some of the markings getting a little bit heel side of center. This one's fairly centered. And that certainly people's perception of kind of where to line up is affected by that. So it may be that some of the heads without much of a marking on the top might suit someone's eye a little bit better from that standpoint. So Mizuno, not many people would really think about Mizuno as a driver head, but actually this has been pretty solid. So a little bit of a different sound. It's a little bit of a harder note. I've just held that a little bit heel side. So you can see launch angle upper mid. So this is back into the sort of 9.5 degree heads. Definitely seen this head retaining a bit of launch angle. So if you're someone who wants to get a little bit more flight, this isn't a bad head at all. So I've just got a little bit heel side on that, so the spin's just popped up a little bit, but ball speed's not dropped off too much. So if I can get one a little bit more centered. Yeah, still a little bit held off. So I'm going to do one more just because we have seen this to be pretty low spin when it comes out right. Those two have I've just kind of held a little bit aloft onto that. But I mean, very consistent flight there. But upper mid in terms of launch. Yeah, got the face squared through there. Slightly lower on the face. Again, ball speed retention, that was strike point was a little bit lower. Ball speed retention, absolutely the same as the other strike points. But what we can see there, where I've got the face squared in, spin comes back down. So it's in the same kind of region on spin as TSR2. Fairly strong, kind of mid to strong, but as a head, definitely kicks it up a little bit more.
Time for a couple of questions. Aidan from Ireland, thanks for tuning in. Recent testing after speed training, I'm 109 miles an hour for driver on GC quad with course wings. Do I need to re-look at my shafts for flex, e.g. 60 grams, 6.0 smoke yellow and KBS dollar taper, 120 stiff?
What's the speed gone from? I couldn't hear that first.
And if you could just drop us a line, let us know what your speed has gone from and to, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily, so the flex bit, just to kind of, it's a myth that we try and debunk as much as possible. Flex will not make a big difference. It's feel more than anything else. To go from an S to an X, you're looking at less than 5% of the amount of flex in the shaft changing. It's a feel, it's how it feels in your hands. So I play, I've been playing, this is a crease, I'm 110, 111 when I'm swinging on the course, and I use a stiff flex.
Okay, Aidan's gone from 102, so up 7 miles an hour.
So 7 miles, well done for a start. That's a good upkick. Flex on its own won't be critical. It's depending on how you're developing your speed, if you've changed your sequencing a little bit, making sure that you and the club are coming into impact the same. If you've developed a little bit more of a snap to your speed, then something that you can kind of laser use and kind of pull on the weight and catch up versus sort of snapping, it could actually leave it behind you by generating more speed and more, technically you might say more power, more distance. If you're generating a little bit more snap and a faster acceleration, then actually you could start to leave a club behind. So someone like Bryson has actually gone higher balance point as he's got quicker, because the faster you kick, if it's heavy in the bottom end, you're going to leave it behind. So actually he's got more weight in the club, but it's more evenly distributed. So it's more about that and whether that allows you to control the face. It's not a definite correlation of more speed equals more weight or stiffer flex. It just depends whether you're still in control of the club face or not. So it's how you're generating your speed. A stiffer shaft might feel a bit more stable, so therefore might give you a bit more confidence to hit through the line. But it's more, it's going to be more about that and whether the mass and where it is still syncs up.
Okay, another couple of questions before we crack on. Matt, thanks for tuning in from Portsmouth. Matt says, my current driver is about 10 years old. I don't hit driver much. He struggles with the right side of the course. Yep. But would it be worth reviewing given driver development?
Yes, drivers, if you've a 10-year-old driver is going to be outperformed off centre without a shadow. Well, I say without a shadow. It is almost a racing certainty. I would struggle to believe you won't improve off centre with the current heads, because that's where they focus their development. Out the middle, technically, you're unlikely to find much ball speed, but certainly off centre, they're definitely less volatile. And it could be that, for example, if you're good with fairway and not good with driver, that shaft length plays part of the problem. Going back about 10 years, there were some brands who'd gone longer than they are now. As standard, and that just makes them prohibitive and hard to use. So there are kind of two elements. One is just the setup prohibitive, i.e. length, weight, but definitely the current drivers are, and this isn't just me saying this because we sell clubs, but are 100% the best ball speed retention across the face of anything we've ever seen consistently across the brands. They've all done a very good job with that.
Another quick one from Germany. Flyfee Newbie, I hope I've pronounced your handle correctly. I play the TSR2 and really enjoying to play it. My average spin is 2800 with an average carry of 220 yards, neutral setting. Any recommendations to lower the spin rate with the settings?
So I'm going to assume that you're in A1 setting, which is well, assuming you're right-handed, you're in A1 setting, or D4 if you're left-handed. If it's in the standard setting, then your only options are to go, if it's the A1 and you're right-handed, to D1 or C1. C1's flatter lie, which makes it less likely to go left. D1 will reduce the loft about 1/2 degree, and if you're left-handed in the D4 setting, then A4 will reduce it slightly, but there's not a lot of room to go down in loft on the Titleist hosels. However, if you're carrying it 220, then you don't need to reduce spin by that much. Otherwise, you might suffer with carry, depending on launch angle.
Another quick one, Dan. Thanks for tuning in, buddy. Hope you're well. Looking forward to coming in soon. Have you had much success with adding driver distance with some of the new ultra lightweight shafts?
Definitely, maybe. So it's a real cop-out answer. The honest answer to that is so you've got two routes of gaining speed with some of the really lightweight shafts. One is that someone's playing too heavy and that they can just move it more efficiently. Definitely, the materials now are better, which means they're more stable at lighter weights. So it's possible to make lighter weight shafts that aren't just a complete fishing rod, that feel incredibly loose. So if that lighter weight and the more stable feel gives someone more confidence, then to use that weight and doesn't affect spin too much. So I'm flitting a little bit. The more stable materials allow lighter weight shafts to be more stable and not pop spin up quite so much, to go back over my thinking there. So that has the potential to help. The only other way would be if you could then go, if someone's a very consistent driver of the ball, that it might allow you to go longer in length, lighter in shaft weight, to try to max out speed as much as possible. On its own, it's still dependent on that weight suiting the player. So if I go lighter than a 60-gram weight, when I get out in course, I just lose the club and then I'm all over the place. So it's got to match up with how you develop your speed and allow you to control the club head. It's not just about speed, it's about being able to direct it as well. So.
Aidan, thanks for your other question. I've pinned it, we will come back to it. Ian saying, loving the shoe, Simon. I bet they had a few miles an hour.
They should do. I've got to run away from people with them. No, I decided to go. I always get comments on trouser colour, so I thought I'd add the shoes this week. So as you can tell, you've got to be playing well if you're going to play in these. So or just be thick-skinned to all the ribbing you get at the club. But no, I like a bright pair of shoes and a bright pair of trousers. So I'm not shy about it. Yeah, I'll go there. So next driver. Assuming no other questions now. Next driver, the AeroJet, the Cobra AeroJet. So this is the, for want of a better phrase, standard model. So these are just coming this week, and by the word aero, as from the video with Tio we did out in Orlando, this is really about aerodynamics, the smoothness of that sole and the angles, allowing the air to flow over quickly and allow the club to move a little bit faster. Is the main principle. Again, composite here for lighter materials in the front, that little bit of a channel there, as per the Mizuno. Composite in the crown, I get that angle right. So very lightweight. Weight at the back, it's a same formula as everybody else. It's because of the line at the back, you can see the back edge quite a bit. And actually, as far as the face goes, it's a very flat face. Some of the other heads visually have a little bit more bulge and roll. So that's something that I think is quite noticeable with this head, and could help someone with alignment, possibly, but quite distinctive as a feature on it. This is one of the ones where, because of the head shape, there's a small C Cobra logo on the top, which looks a little bit more inside the face, a little bit more towards the heel, which we have had people comment on with other models about setting up to them. But Cobra generally been pretty strong. The LTD X series, last series was very good. So hoping for good things with this head. So it's noticeably a little bit of a harder sound. As you can see with that, and ball speed's up a little bit more as well for me there. I've just crept a little bit more ball speed. It's a little bit of a, how do you describe, it's a bit of a feel thing. It's got a little bit of a harder note off the face. So quite a distinctive sound, but I'll do one more just to validate those shots, but not quite as high a launch, but still in that kind of mid to low end on spin. And bearing in mind, this is not the low spin model. It's quite a, and that's a bit of a fade, it's quite a strong flight. I'll see if I can square that up. Solid there, yeah. So that is not a toe strike. because that would have looped a little bit more. Again, ball speed pretty solid, but you can see where that spin's gone. That spin's really come out quite low. So now there are plus sides to this. So as a head, you know, and there's one of the others we'll come on to in particular later on, we've been really surprised by how low spin the models are. It's actually the Callaway ParaDym, which we'll come on to later. But this one is a bit of a spin killer. And I think what we're going to find ourselves doing with this head is lofting it up quite a bit. You know, for someone who hits a bit of a, you know, for want of a better phrase, a bit of a weaker cut, you know, if you're right-handed or left to right, a bit of a spinny left to right, what this header will allow us to do is to use the higher loft setting, even the drawbars on their hosel setting, a higher loft and close the toe a little bit. But if someone spins it a lot, then this head really could take the spin down. So you might need to use a little bit more loft than other heads to make sure we get the launch angle there. But in terms of what it does to spin, it's strong. It is strong. So from a performance point of view, it may not be everyone's first choice in terms of feel and sound, but actually in terms of spin performance, really very strong. I'm going to put the other bit of the Cobra, actually, you know, they aren't quite as dear as some of the other models as well. Driver prices have kicked up quite a bit in the last few years, and you know, as an off-the-rack pricing with Titleist, the LST Ping, the ParaDyms, the TaylorMades, are all up around or up over £500 as an off-the-rack club. The Cobra's, you know, 60, 70 pounds less dear. So actually, kind of the punch for your pound. That's a horrible phrase, isn't it? But it sounds really marketing-y. But actually, quite a strong performing head, and it might allow you to go somewhere on a shaft if you want to go a little bit extra on the shaft, and just keep it under quite such a high cost. You know, something like the ParaDym or the Titleist, you know, when you start to put some of the top grade shafts in, they can get pretty punchy on price, and the Cobra will just hold that back a little bit. But yeah, really for a non-low spin model, pretty low spin. So this is then the LS, the low spin. So you can see the two weights at the front of the head, that pulls the centre of gravity down and forwards, and that's what keeps the spin down a little bit more. Slightly more compact shape. So you know, similar, very square, very square face. It's, yeah, a very classic look. There's nothing offensive about the Cobra setup at all. But we'll be interested to see after that last hit where this spin goes. But this was one of the very low spin heads that I'd hit earlier in the week. It's a very solid feel with that weight forward. Okay, I've hit that. That's fast. That's a fast ball speed. So clearly it's just my swing. No, that was well hit. But we can see ball speed. So for me, weight forward has always been a good thing. I have a little bit of an under release. I had a little bit of loft through impact. So it's not a massive surprise to see weight forward giving me a little bit more ball speed. But you can see that launch angles come down by, and this is, you know, the 9 degree in its standard position. I've not lofted it down. Launch angles come down by a degree and a bit. So where we were with the Titleist, with the Mizuno head, we're up at, I was up at, you know, 13.5, 14 odd degrees of launch. This isn't to say these are just in their standard settings. They will measure different lofts between the different models and different brands, so that will play a part in it. But this has really brought the flight down. You know, very solid feeling head though. A little higher on the face. So you can see a bit of a drop off in ball speed there. Just looped it up. I'll just give that one more. Yeah. Quite as middle as the first one. And this is one of the things, you know, with the weight forward, you are going to lose, a bit like the TSR3 to TSR2, you lose a little bit of that stability off centre. Now, it's not got away from me from a shape point of view, but that spin's dipped down to 1600. That's pretty low. That is going to start to lose carry distance. It runs, as long as the ground's running, which it's sort of starting to do again now, it'll chase out and it'll actually get to a good distance. You'll get further up the fairway than you expect. But, and this is something we'll see with a couple of the other, one of the other heads in particular, is that spin variation, the knuckle off, ironically is a little more dangerous than maybe one that kicks up a little bit. The one that kicks up a bit doesn't go as far, but it lands soft. It's predictable what it's going to do when it lands. The one that really knuckles down has the potential to nosedive, knuckle, kick, and then run into goodness knows what. So, I mean, potentially, I know Matt is interested to try this head in particular. He's been off this week on doing his PGA residential, lucky boy. So I know he's interested to hit this one. And at his speed, it'll be interesting to see how that ball speed retention goes. I know he's not been able to beat his F9, I think it is, for ball speed. But for where this spins for him, I think it'll be very interesting. But definitely a little bit lower launch and sort of a stronger flight, but the potential to be a really low spin head, but a very solid feeling head. So do continue to, any questions at all, don't necessarily have to be about the drivers. So any questions you've got, do just fire them in. We will.
I've got a question from James Wedd, watching from Cologne. Any experience using the stack system as a means of increasing swing speed?
So I think any of these systems are, the stack system, I'm less familiar than some of the others, but in terms of, if I'm correct, that uses a bit of resistance. Really, it's about getting your muscles to work at a higher rate. So whether it's actually just taking your driver, not necessarily hitting balls, taking your driver and moving as fast as you can. Anything that gets you to develop and use your obliques, your core, to rotate. Bodies will always settle into comfort ranges. So unless you push them, they'll settle back into a comfort area. So you've got to physically push yourself. It's like any gym work, any development. Unless you push the limits, you're never going to see any progression. So for me, any of these, whether it's speed sticks, whether it's the stack system, whether it's actually just getting your driver and moving as fast as you can, will see some progression. There are some great programs online where you can dial into some of the expertise of swing or kind of speed trainers and have very specific programs and put forward. But ultimately, they're all going to work if you apply yourself. Really, it's about the human doing something outside of the norm. It's standing there and literally swinging as fast as you can, half a dozen swings a day. You will see your club speed go up, or should see your club speed go up. How much is then, I guess, really relative to where you are at that point in time. For me, unless I really hit the gym very, very hard, I might see a couple of miles an hour. And that would be nice. But I need to practice to do that. But yeah, without being specific, any of those systems will benefit, used properly for one. But you need to do it regularly. Otherwise, you'll just settle back into. You can't just generate a couple of miles an hour and then right, I've done it, and stop. You've got to keep pushing it to maintain once you've achieved that bit of extra.
Just briefly moving away from drivers, Christopher Mitchell, thanks for your question. What is currently your best-selling or even best recommended fairway wood for a 12 handicap?
Okay, so I'm going to split it into two. So for, if we're saying a 12 handicap, that's a very competent golfer. But I would say for a fairway wood where you're looking to generate a bit of extra flight, then I would certainly say the Ping, the G430. 430 has proven very, very good over the last few weeks of testing. One, that centre of gravity is that little bit lower and helps to pick it up a bit more. Sits nice and flush to the ground, but for forgiveness across the face and a bit more flight, I would say that's a great point, or great one. For forgiveness and a stronger flight, there are a few more of these that most of the brands have gone for a little bit of the stronger, lower spin performance. Stealth 2, the standard Stealth 2 is always going. TaylorMade are always going to be very good at this. So that generally for a little bit of a flatter top to the flight and stronger performance, that's good. The ParaDym has been across the board quite strong on spin, but the slightly shallower profile, it looks a little bit more friendly, but it doesn't pop the spin and the flight up. It keeps quite a strong flight. I don't want to miss any, but Titleist, if you're looking kind of mid-range TSR2, problem is at the moment they're just a lot of good products. They've now got to the point where there's only a small amount of things they can really do, and then the differentiation points are just how strong they've chosen to get the flights. I think in terms of gauging it around what someone says of a lower to mid handicap golfer, If we're going for forgiveness, I would say higher flight G430, lower flight the Stealth 2 or the ParaDym. So going to move on to G430. So Ping 430, this has been out in the Southern Hemisphere since September, October time. Ping, always very consistent. This alongside that TSR2, and these are heads that are a very safe start point. So when fitting, we're always going to go and look to a head where we can go both ways off of it. We don't, unless it's very, very, very pointed what we need to do. It's nice to go to a new head, but also something that gives us margin, wiggle room for spin and flight both ways. But get very, very consistent performance. You know, Ping always been very good for this. 430 is absolutely no different. It's a much nicer sound than 425. They've got that spot on. Quite uniform in the looks on the top. Not everyone likes the turbulators, but the uniformity of it, the geometry of it, and how that centers off the face, that has been quite popular rather than just a small logo in the middle. It makes it look a little bit more even. But overall performance across the face, it's very hard to argue against the 430 head. So it's not that kind of hard note. I've just pulled that down left a little bit with my action. It's not as hard a sound as the 425 was. It is, I think, a slightly stronger flight than 425. Is that the flight on that one? I got a little bit rolled over on that. I just turned the loft down. So, but it's like the TSR2. It's not a massively high spin head. The difference I would say is it doesn't knuckle spin. So not actually quite middled, but very good ball speed retention. This is a real characteristic of this head. So that one, so you can see I got that slightly low and heel. Spin's gone up a little bit, but for that strike, to keep a 147 efficiency, that's really pretty impressive. That's been a major characteristic of this head. Definitely slightly stronger flight, or for when I've used it, I've seen a slightly stronger flight than 425. But much nicer to hit with, much nicer feedback and feel, but consistency across the face, it's very hard to argue against this head. You know, the lack of drop off in ball speed, unless you literally miss it, is very impressive.
Actually, Simon, whilst we're on that
a little more
note of
so
consistency across the face, Aidan had another question. Lower lofted, higher MOI head versus higher loft, low spin heads. I see a few tour players going to the G430 9° MAX who were playing 10.5 LS and G425.
So, I mean, some of it's about how much forgiveness you want. And you know, so for those guys, they are so efficient with their swings and their delivery that they can play a slightly higher spin head, and yes, they might lose 5-10 yards. But if you look at someone like Tony Finau in the past has used the Max head, he's so darn quick that actually for him, extra distance isn't actually what he's looking for. It's the forgiveness, it's the off-center performance. So lower loft, higher MOI head, proportionally spin goes up. You're going to get, you may not see a massive, because it depends on what settings they put it in. You may not see a massive change in launch angle, probably slightly lower out of it if you're just using standard loft positions. You'll see a little bit lower loft out of the higher MOI, lower lofted head, but it'll retain a bit of spin. But it's a bit like we were saying with the Titleist head, it's off-center performance. They're looking to get away with a little bit more. If you go higher loft, lower spin head, it'll launch a little bit more, but then the head's trying to knock the top of the flight down. Some players will prefer the feel out of the more compact head. So between, for me, the moment I put the Cobra LS on, my ball speed went up. I just got more out of it. And so some of it is going to be just purely numbers based. They're going to look at what produces the best ball speed for me.
Another question from Arizona, Steve. Are Ping heads a little heavier? And if so, does that cause the fitter problems?
Yes and yes. Although this year, less heavy than last year. So 425 was definitely heavier. The LS is the heavier model, and that's one where we're going to be using lighter weights in the back. So actually, it's trying to get the weight down a little bit. Now, granted, you actually then move the CG further forward, which keeps the spin a little bit lower, but you lose a bit of forgiveness. But the gain in performance with the composite crown, which I've got the LS head here actually, you're kind of in a neutral position for forgiveness in theory, relative to where 425 was. I still think this is better across the face than 425. But yeah, it's certain models like TaylorMade the Stealth Plus, where you've got where you're having to build in extra bits. So just to pull this head out, where they're having to put in the structures to build the movable weight around, that adds weight. The Stealth Plus has always been one of the slightly heavier heads. Ping have generally gone slightly heavier in the head than most, but they are standard user counterbalance shaft. So their theory is counterbalance shaft keeps the swing weight in check, but the heavier head, it's more energy transfer when it strikes the ball. The flip of that is that it only works if it suits the player. But the answer to that is yes. Ping have traditionally been a little bit heavier, and it's where Ping have a very strong principle on how their clubs are built and fitting, and it is less simple to get the weight components to fine tune them than other brands. But as a brand, they are open to doing it. It's just you have to do it certain ways with them.
And excuse me, Aidan, just in relation to your question on my driver build, 425 weight's compatible with 430, so I just happened to find a 17-gram weight that I could use with that 430 build.
Yeah.
Ping don't supply weights. You do find though that depending on the spec a driver is ordered, they will use particular weights. In some instances, we can just chop and change the weights depending on a spec we're looking to achieve.
Yeah, and the 425s went from every 3 grams from 14 through to 29. So it's a massive 15-gram change, massive 7 or 8 swing weight points. What the 430 heads do have, and it's actually what I've got in the back of this to get my balance, is the high launch spec. Actually, that grey weight, that's based around the high launch spec. So they do a lightweight shaft and a lighter weight to get total weight down, to increase speed and freedom and get a bit more launch, which does work. We're going to be using a lot of those, assuming we can get hold of them, to get the balance in check. But yeah, you can. They are actually, they fit, and at the moment we are, in some of our builds and some of our fittings, using them to spec them out. You can interchange the weights. Because ultimately it's just a mass at the back. It's a bit of branding as to how, when they change the colouring and the schemes and things, but they are interchangeable. So LST, so this one's the Max and the SFT do not have the composite crown which kind of wraps around. That's to save a few grams in weight, allows them to move it around in the sole a little bit more. Again, similar to the 430 Max, it's a much nicer sound, less clunky and clanky. For a low spin head, again, it's consistency again. This is a head where we've seen so much stability from this head, and so at the moment Ping are completely out of 9 degrees of this until mid-late April is current information. Just worldwide demand, worldwide supply. We haven't had our 9-degree demo of this. I don't believe there are any currently available anywhere. So that's a measure of how successful the head's been. But it's where with the other low spin heads, what we are seeing, particularly that Cobra, if we get it a bit toey, that's been really knuckled. We haven't seen as much of that with this head. So again, slightly more compact look than the 430 Max. Let's hit this one here. So what I've had to do with this head is use a 10.5 and minimise the loft. So again, this is what you'll see for me. Ball speed up, that efficiency 148. Weight further forward, I get more ball speed out of it. That's something I've always had. But launch angle down a little bit. So we're back, like the Cobra head, we're back at that 12 odd degree launch angle. It's not quite as low spin as the Cobra head, but it's still pretty low spin. But from a feel point of view, it's very stable. It's again, probably the most stable of the low spin heads. It's Ping, so it's not a massive surprise. But for a 10.5 head, it's not popping that launch angle up. So you can see there that where it's a bit higher in loft, if I were to get the 9 degree and having it standard setting, it's going to pull both of those numbers down a little bit. Going to get closer to 2.1, 2.2 on spin. That shot sort of 12.5 to 13 on launch. So it is a low spin head. You could see with the 430 Max, the spin was a little bit more, so 2.5, 2.6, and that's in the lower loft. So it is lower spin. It's not drastically lower spin, but what you get with this is a very playable head with low spin. And and a head that we're not going to see those massive dips with in terms of spin. So if we're looking to really knuckle spin off, then yeah, there's some other heads in there. But if you're looking for a more compact, slightly lower launching head without just doing that to spin rate, that's a good model.
Good question from our very good friend Tarek. Thanks for watching, Tarek. Hi guys, assuming you are trying to achieve 11 degrees of loft with the G430 driver, what is the difference between taking a 10.5 degree driver and lofting up and taking a 12 degree driver and lofting down?
So what you're doing is you're changing where that centre of gravity sits. So sorry if I'm talking off screen. So I'll put this together and I'll show the difference. So if you're lofting a club up, then what you're doing is you're actually lowering the centre of gravity. You're also closing the face a little bit. So depending on someone's miss and shot shape, the more you loft up, what happens is adding loft goes, because around the shaft angle there, the head actually comes in a little bit, so it goes that way. So the more you loft it up, the more the toe comes in, and the more you, but also the more you lower that centre of gravity. So technically, you're going to get a lower spin performance, which might sound obvious being it's the lower loft, of course you're going to get lower spin performance, but the more you turn that loft up, the easier it is to strike it above that centre of gravity line, and that gears the spin down. If you're de-lofting, because it's around that line, it turns the head that way, so it opens it a little bit. But it also, the more you de-loft, the higher the centre of gravity goes. So actually, you can use the heads to manipulate actual loft and where the centre of gravity sits a little bit. So how much spin relative to that loft you're putting on. Now, there are some sleeves, so like the TaylorMade ones are 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees higher loft and lower loft. Most, like Titleist, Callaway, have 1 notch down, 2 notches up, because you're less likely to turn the loft down and open the face up in the grand scheme of things. You can get some sleeves where you can, for Callaway, where you can manipulate it down a little bit more. But it's really about moving the face, the loft and the face angle and the centre of gravity to you know, shot shape and a little bit of spin relative to that launch angle.
Another quick one from Steve. How much can affect left-right dispersion using the Ping flat settings versus standard settings? But I mean, we've actually seen going from standard to flat, there will be a change in swing weight as well, which could have an effect on dispersion.
Yeah, it's a couple of bits. I mean, the lie setting is minimal. It's not massive because there's so little loft on the face. If you've got lots of loft and you change the lie, then what you're doing is you're changing where. Find out where the. I'll use a pen for this. If you've got lots of loft and you change the lie, then you're changing where that face is pointing. If you've got very little loft and you're changing the lie, you're not changing that left-right gearing very much. So by flattening the lie a little bit, you're moving the centre of gravity a little bit further away from the shaft, which gears it open a little bit. Some of it is just so that it's not just sat with the toe looking up at you, because that then can create, so more upright allows the toe to work round a little bit more, flatter slows that rotation a little bit because of that centre of gravity difference from the shaft. And that affects the swing weight a little bit. So the answer is a little bit, but it is pretty marginal. It is pretty marginal. The upright setting will affect it a little bit more. Yeah, fairly marginal, fairly marginal. So going on to the, but it all has an effect, so there is some effect. So going on to the ParaDym, standard ParaDym, as you can see, is a little bit of lead tape, just getting the head weight in line with the others here. So again, very light composite in the crown and the sole, lots of weight back, heavy face, updating on the jailbreak tech on this. Yeah, ParaDym, I think this year, if we asked any of our fitters, in one word, describe ParaDym, or one word, one phrase, it'd just say low spin. It's been noticeably lower spin than previous Callaway models across all of the models, ball speed pretty good actually. I mean, as a bit of a bomber's head, if you create the launch with these heads, then they can get them flatter and get the spin down and get them going. It's almost traditionally what you'd use TaylorMade for in that respect, but really pretty stable, particularly this one, the standard ParaDym, really pretty stable. Good driver heads. It's just the question with these heads, do they spin enough for that player? So this is the non-low spin, this is the standard rather than triple diamond. And a little bit more of a pop of sound out of it, generates a little bit of flight. So I've always historically launched Callaway drivers really quite high. So what we can see with that is the spin for that is not a million miles off where the 430 LS was. So slight, my neutral path, slight drawbars to that. That's a pretty solid hit. So yeah, so flight-wise, that's pretty good. I mean, it's one of the things that I'm going to be going through my own driver setup soon. I've got an M4 that really annoyingly worked really well last Saturday. And I was sure this year I'd change it. The interesting bit for me this year is ball speed. I know I can get a bit more out the lower spin heads, but I don't know whether the low spin heads now knuckle the spin off too much. It could be, I think one of the things we're seeing this year is the amount of players that historically would have gone into the low spin model can actually play the standard model, gain a bit of forgiveness, but not lose very much in terms of that flight strength and distance. So I think that's something that is a bit of a trend this year. And possibly, like the question about the tour players, something that you're seeing with them as well. So ParaDym Triple Diamond, so a little bit more compact. This one has the weights, you can shift the weights back and front. So actually what I'm going to do is I've got the weight at the back. I'm going to put the heavy weight forward because that then is for want of a better phrase, the exaggeration of it. We've seen very good ball speeds off this head. It's been really quite impressive for ball speed in this sort of the first couple of weeks of using it. The bit that is interesting, this has been, and it probably won't be now because I'm going to say it, but this has been really low spin. Almost sort of, it's been comments of SLDR-like in terms of spin, which for those that have played that head, that was an absolute knuckle. Yeah, a pretty stable head, but the spin strength of this head, as you can see there, I'll just move that heavier weight into the front just so we get the true kind of low spin element to it. It's been very low spin. I mean, so someone like Rahm has had to go up in loft a little bit, as I understand it, to make sure he's got enough trajectory. This one doesn't have any alignment markings on the crown. So actually it's a very clean look, which I think some players have really enjoyed. But good for ball speed, but the thing I would say is beware on spin. If you want low spin, this is definitely a head to test. Very, very square, clean look. I like the look of it actually. Oh, that's just the worst swing I put it all session.
I'll put it on full screen, don't worry.
I nearly missed it and it's still got 158 ball speed. So I was going to have one at some point. I got overexcited with the low spin head. That was an absolute shocker. Right, take two. Breakfast ball. Yeah, so ball speed back at 158. For probably a slightly lower strike, 1900 on spin. That wasn't perfect on strike. Again, as with all the low spin heads with the weights forward, very solid feel. Hasn't got any of that tinniness or harshness. It's a slightly muted sound, but very solid feel. Almost got a little bit of kind of snap to it again, 159. So I've blocked that out of there. 2.5. So this isn't really representing how low spin we've seen this head. I've managed to manipulate it and get a bit of spin onto this. But it has actually, I'll see if I can get one, but it has actually almost, I wouldn't go as far as saying scared a couple of the fitters how low spin this can get. But yeah, you can really get a lot of spin off this head. 159 ball speed, maybe slightly, yeah, there we go. So not towed or anything, great ball speed, that's something we've seen off this head, but again, we're back into that. That wasn't the towy one. So it's not like that Cobra head where I got 1600 revs of spin out of a toe hit. That was a solid strike. And you can see how low that spin is on a very neutral line. So for a high speed player who generates a lot of flight, a lot of spin, this could be an absolute game changer as a head potentially. But something that if you're not a high speed or a higher launch player, that head, whilst it looks very pretty and feels very solid, could create quite a knuckleball for you. So just be careful with that head. It's a very well designed head for what it does, but it's surprised us at how low spin it's been. But that does make it a very strong head for distance. So if you want a bomber and you've got plenty of speed, then that's a good model. So last couple, if you're getting bored of me seeing these clown shoes, seeing me kind of swipe them away. But moving on to the TaylorMade, so we've got the Stealth 2. So as with a lot of the heads, we're into composite in the middle of the sole, composite in the crown, weight out the face in TaylorMade's case, although not a lot over last year's model. Very distinctive looking, and that has divided opinion. I think there's I wouldn't say a carryover. I think what is good about these heads is the sound and the feel off the face, that carbon face. That was something that a lot of people were quite skeptical about last year. But actually the feel of the face, a lot of the time players actually enjoyed the feel of the face. And so, oh, that's a lot better than I thought. So that's not something to worry about. On this model where it's got the red frame on the back, I'll just pull that up here. That's something that, again, it'll divide opinion. Some players like the way it frames the back edge. You've got the face you can see from an alignment point of view, and that framing, it can make it look not too big. But it's in the eye line of some other players. So you can actually not on this model. The Stealth Plus is the only one you can My Stealth, that you can change the colour schemes on. It's only the Plus model. But the visibility of the face has helped alignment for some players. So TaylorMade are never going to produce a weak driver head. I think with this model it was always a case of how much extra would it get. Ball speeds and things we found very good out of first generation Stealth. I don't believe this is, I've done a few less of these than some of the other guys, but I don't, ball speed seemed pretty solid off this as well. Maybe a little bit, just got a little bit underneath that. Yeah, so I just spooned it a little bit, so a little bit of spin there. If I get a more neutral impact, again, pretty solid on speed. What we'll see here, speed-wise, they're all in a very similar lane, and there's a trend for my swing of the lower spin heads giving me a couple of miles an hour extra. But that won't apply to everyone. That was a better line through. So squared that one up a little bit more. So it's not, and I think this is where I've maybe seen slightly variable performance depending on the swing. So for me, this retains a little bit of spin. I think what I've seen this year is a little bit more of a separation between the two models on spin than first generation Stealth. I think if anything, the Plus model hasn't changed as much as this one. This, again, definitely pretty sort of, from a dispersion point of view, I think this has been pretty strong. I want to spend a bit more time with it to form a slightly stronger opinion across different swing styles. I think I've seen a little bit more variability in performance from a heel strike point of view out of this head, but it's definitely safer on the toe side than previous TaylorMade models have been. So you're always going to get better and worse spots on a head. Some historically Callaway heads have been great out the heel side. TaylorMade's historically have been less good out the heel, but better out the toe. You tend to get trends that way around. Let's give that one more. Thinking about something completely different when I swung that, so I've nearly missed it. What I was looking at was actually just how obvious, because of the colour contrast, the logo is there, but how obvious it sits a little bit more on the inside of the head. That's something that I've noticed a few people say to me about this head. As I took the club away, I was looking at that and thinking about it. So again, it's look, for something I've nearly missed, that's pretty good, but you can see the ball speed drop off there. Let me just do one more to be fair to this head. A little lower in the face, but should see that spin a little bit more. Yeah, and that for me has been where this head at the mid to upper kind of height and slightly toe side has been a great head. My thoughts on this is if you're a low heel striker, in my experience, I don't think I've seen this be particularly strong out of that part of the head, but out of the higher toe element to it, been very good. And I think that's been my only reservation with this head. If you're somebody who strikes out the heel, I don't think it's as strong maybe as last year's model, but that's where they've gained a little bit of spin to make it a slightly safer head than first generation as well. So you can't have your cake and eat it. You either have a head that spins a bit more and is a bit safer, maybe not quite as hot, or you go the lower spin, you lose a bit of forgiveness, but it comes out like a bomb when it goes. So, but it has separated a bit more off the Plus series. So the Plus has got that movable weight, a little more compact, weight further forward.
Another question in. Hi guys, how much difference do you notice between Sim 2 Max and Stealth models?
Sim 2 Max. So Stealth across the face for ball speed, first generation in particular, was I mean, with the carbon face definitely improved that. Sim 2 Max. I think this is one of the things with drivers. There's not massive progression. We're seeing bigger progression on fairway woods than we are with drivers. You know, they're pretty much at a limit. That's why TaylorMade went to the composite face, because they felt there wasn't really a lot else they could do with the titanium face. There's a bigger change going to the composite. So definitely a bit more forgiveness, a bit better off centre. The ball speed retention from Sim 2 Max to Stealth was definitely better. I think that would be the mark point. TaylorMade now, and TaylorMade more than any other brand, probably because they've been criticised a little bit more, are now saying this is not a driver to replace Stealth, possibly even to replace Sim 2 Max. And what we've seen is if you go back to I've got an M4, you go back to an M4 and M5, M1 or M2, off-centre, you're then seeing a really tangible change. In principle, that's where we've seen the performance kick. Not necessarily from any of the brands going back one or two models. I had a chap in this morning who's got a 425 LST. I can't beat it. It still produces great numbers. Just because it's not this year's model doesn't make it a bad driver. We've reshafted a lot of M2s, the first generation M2s over the years. They were just a really well-designed head, and the gains are off-centre, so if you strike it fairly near the middle, you're not going to see very much difference. And I think that's something now that even the brands have herbalised, and they don't want someone to think they can just, as we used to 10, 15 years ago, change a driver every year, every other year, and see a marked improvement. It's just not physically possible to do that unless what you've got is set up wrong in the first place. So I would say you need to be looking. I mean, I've got a driver that's 6, 7 years old, and I'm thinking about changing it this year, but I'm not convinced. With how I hit mine, I'm not convinced I can gain that much out of it. It might just be a new toy, but I would say driver-wise, you need to be looking 3 to 5 years before you're going to see something tangible from a tech upgrade point of view to make it really worth making a change, because they're not cheap. There's got to be value in changing them, and unless you can quantify and go, you know what, I can gain 5 to 7 yards, or rather I'm not losing as much off centre, the dispersion's tighter. There's got to be value in that. Now, value might just be that you want a new toy and feel good about it, and if that's enough value to make you change, then great, that's your choice. But data-wise, I think 3 to 5 years is probably a realistic time frame to change driver over. So into the Stealth Plus, very much their traditional low spin, higher speed player, lower spin. I mean, actually, as a head, the equivalent of the Plus, the M1, M3, M5 have always tested well at moderate club speeds from a ball speed point of view. But again, that's weight forward, does transfer energy well from a speed point of view. And that's where these heads have always sat. This one swings a little bit heavier from a base head weight point of view. But according to what we've seen with the other models, I should see a slight increase in ball speed from this head. God, it does feel good. 158. So for me, the consistency is, again, and we will see this across good ball speed out the weight forward heads. A little bit more of a snap off this head from a sound point of view. Actually, it sounds a little bit quicker than Stealth 2. I think with this head, it's a little bit, they've maybe gained a little bit more forgiveness on this from original Stealth Plus, a little bit. But I think from what our fitters also said, there's not necessarily, it's not like ParaDym Triple Diamond versus Rogue Max LS. Rogue Max LS was low spin, but wasn't that quick on ball speed. ParaDym Triple Diamond is up on ball speed and down on spin. They've made a definite change in profile on that head. This one, it's a baby step. It's They've saved a couple of grams here and there, maybe made it just a little bit more forgiving, but ultimately it's a very slight progression off last year's product. Left that open a little bit. So yeah, so if we want to, spooned a little bit high right, it's not popped the spin up too much. I'll do one more with this. Again, very, very solid feeling head. I think this is the kind of head that, I won't go as far as saying traditionalists, because that's going to be more the TSR3, but it's a very, very solid feeling club head. It's got a real kind of guts to the strike, by virtue of having that heavier front weight. Definitely doesn't flare that flight up, unless you, like I did in that shot, add some loft to it. Actually looks slightly more lofted than previous models in terms of, what I mean by that is how much face I can see relative to previous versions. And I don't think it's to do with the red face because it was the same last year. I think the actual loft on this looks to be slightly higher than previous models, which maybe just makes it a bit more mainstream. They do an 8-degree in this head as well. That was a solid hit. So should see that, yeah. 2-1. So it's back down 200 or 300 revs lower spin than from something like 430 LST. Not quite as low for me, not quite as low as ParaDym. Very solid feeling club. Yeah, that's a nice, from a mid to strong flight point of view, that's a nice set of numbers.
I think it sits squarer.
Nick just popping in for the side there. It sits. It does. I think what they've got is the line around the top here and how that face sits. It's a very neutral sitting head, and I think actually alignment-wise, TaylorMade, the old white crown. Lots of people like because you could actually that differentiation in colour between the crown and the face helped you align it. So, as you say, I think it's very true. Actually, it's one of those things. Once you look at it, that's this very clear line across the top of the face. A very square sitting head.
Just compared to the original one, I think people when I put it in their hands, they think it sits a little squarer.
Yeah. Whereas the previous one had a little bit of a.
It's almost like the twist face was a bit more obvious on the original Stealth, and maybe it's a little more dialed down potentially in that
possibly,
model. Just maybe that top line just takes it.
Yeah, maybe just, and also just the way that that colouring and the way the toe lines go around, the way it graduates back there, all those bits affect how it sits. And it's very true. Actually, it's last year's model definitely. People said they thought it sat open. Yeah,
quite a lot. Used to get that as feedback quite a lot.
Whether maybe the line around the sole, it doesn't drop. If that was slightly higher, if you get a little bit of a graduation. I'm going to get my old M4 here because I know this one does it. If you look at the massive differential in sole shape there. Yeah. This head, because of that high back, wants to sit on its backside and open up, whereas on Stealth Plus, it sits flush, it stays there because that doesn't rock back. So that'll be, I think, a part of it as well. But yeah, good. Thank you for chipping in. I'm going to, just as a reference point, just hit one with my current gamer. Which, as a friend of mine on Saturday said, if I can't find a driver that works, then we're all screwed. Which performed. I can't really say annoyingly well on Saturday, but I had my heart set on the change this year. But just to give us sort of a mark, so this is an 8.5 degree M4 standard loft, so the XC6 shaft. I had this in the bag I switched shaft a few years back, just dropped a little bit of weight, but this head's been in the bag 6-7 years. Weight low and forward, hence that kind of shaping as well. It gets the centre of gravity low. It sits a little bit open, which for someone whose miss has always been a flip left, it's just been a great driver for me. So just to give a kind of reference marker on my own club, I'll probably hit an absolute rotter with this. A little lower on the face, but you can see the ball speed, 160, 161. This is my problem, ladies and gentlemen, is that if you've got a club that works really well, and you can do that with it.
But Simon, that is a very, very valid point. Whilst you might pay a little bit more for a driver with a premium aftermarket shaft, the long-term cost is really, you haven't changed your driver for 6 years.
Yeah, and believe me, I wanted to. Not because I don't like this, just because I want a new toy. And so, and this is the thing, people say, oh, what's the point of getting fit? Am I good enough? Or, the reason for getting fitted is you don't change over and over. You get a club that, if we do our job right, that it works with you and for you and complements what you do. So as long as you don't have an injury or change your kind of movement patterns massively, like I haven't changed irons for 4, 5, 6 years, or 4 or 5 years, and even that was a small fine tune. Haven't changed driver for 6, 7 years. I can switch every year if I want to, but when it does that, okay, that was a little low on the face, so it launched a bit low, but there has to come a point where, for anybody, there's got to be value in doing it, and performance-wise, some of the value of getting fitted, yes, the base cost is higher, especially when you go to aftermarket shafts, can be noticeably higher than buying off the rack, but the upside is that you don't have to change them. The amount of times we've had people come back in wanting a new driver. There's one gentleman who, I won't name names, Nick, but if you're watching, you know who you are, who 3 or 4 times in a row said, I want you to sell me a new driver, and then we've hit his, we can't beat it. He goes, oh, well, I can't give you any money then. And if we do our job well, then there's no need to. You don't need to keep changing.
The bittersweet thing is we've seen probably in excess of 17,000 golfers over the last 18, 19 years, some of which we'd love to see more often, but if we've done our job correctly, we don't see them very often.
And it's a bit like Stuart, our biomechanics chiropractor and therapeutic biomechanics guy. He says, if I do my job right, I don't want to see you regularly. We'd love to see people. We have great friends that we've developed over the years, but from an equipment point of view, there's no point changing this. There's a definite benefit, or as I say, it's a feel-good thing. I do it with other parts of my life. I'll buy something I don't need, but I just want it, and so there is an element of feel-good.
Like shoes.
Like shoes. Yeah, I definitely don't need these. I blame my wife for that. She's a terrible influence on me. But
she doesn't like those ones.
No, she helped pick the colours. Yeah, I think. I'm going to say that she won't be watching anyway. She will be today.
She said she is.
She will be today. That's for sure. But it's our whole ethos is we sell performance, not we want the clubs to be right, and being right might be keep what you've got. And so if I can swung that, if I can get one more out of this, I can get as much out of this as I can without jumping all over it, which I've just hit that one well. So the only thing I might need to add a bit of loft to this head as my actions change, my flights come down. I haven't hit one longer than that with anything else, and I shouldn't be disappointed.
And that's not because you're warmed up now.
Well, no, I've stood for 3-4 minutes. Okay, it's my club. It's really dialed in, all of that, but ultimately it's the soft bit on the end, i.e. this bit. If I get the young lady who's just walked through the back of shot to, no, it's not her fault, it's me. If I work harder, I can get fitter and stronger and put a bit more speed on. But I can't outperform this club from a distance point of view when I hit it right, which is, no, don't worry, you're safe to. A good club doesn't stop being a good club. So if you've got a club that's performing well, we're more than happy to validate that it's performing well. But as we said, this is I'd say going with M4, we've had this range before M6, we've had the Sim Max, Sim 2 Max, Stealth, now Stealth 2. Nothing's giving me a noticeable upkick in performance. So the middle of drivers, the middle of the face has been set since 2003. So it's the off-centre bits. So if I start slapping it all over the face, then yes, the spin variation is going to go up and down more on this head than it will on some of the others. But I will probably build one anyway, just because I won't get rid of this. I'll probably build one anyway, just because I can. But I'm not sure I can beat it. So don't just change for the sake of change, and that's something we'd always say. Don't just make a change of club just because it looks pretty, or if your current club's performing well, then chances are it's set up well, and it might be that using the same shaft and throttling head onto it, just as an update, that's something that feasibly you're not necessarily going to hurt yourself too much from a change. But I would always say, where there's now the facility to, not just with us, but other fitters and other establishments, you can test things out and check first, because there's got to be, clubs cost a lot nowadays. There's got to be value in a change. So yeah.
Tom Sung, thanks for joining
Yeah.
in. He said,
Hi, Tom.
he said, I'm sorry, I just have to. Simon will know why.
but again, that's all part of it, isn't it? You know, it's we play for enjoyment, and I mean, Tom, you're not as bad as your brother. You're very great. You're very lucky you've got your brother. You get lots of hand-me-downs.
Hey, he's been nice about your shoes.
Oh, is that the shoes? Oh, I
No,
thought you meant-
Peter is.
Oh, Peter. Oh, well, yeah, my joys. You can go wild on that site. But if you're lucky and have a brother like Tom's brother, then you get the opportunity to try lots of equipment without having to buy it, because he's done it for you. But yeah, there is the element of, say, we play for fun, and part of the enjoyment is a new toy every now and then. And you know what? It's about feeling good about your game, but getting the performance alongside it. And so whatever you're doing, if you're going to make a change, just make sure you test things out and try them before you buy them, just to make sure you're not losing performance by making a change. So thank you very much for all the input. As ever, we're really grateful for all the questions, all the comments, and the global support that we've had today as well. There's one more coming in.
Just one final question from Richard. What shaft are you using in that M4?
It's exactly the same as the others. It's the TaylorMade XC6 in a stiff. Mainly, technically I could use an X, but this one went so well when I tested it first round. There's no point changing it. Yeah, so the XC, it's a sort of mid to lower mid balance point, stable tip, designed around sort of mid to low launch, lower spin in theory. It ultimately just swings really well for me, and slightly firmer feel in the tip. I just feel a bit more comfortable with as well. But has been a really great performing shaft for me over the last few years. So. But yeah, thank you again for all the comments, all the questions, all the support. We really appreciate it, and from so far away as say Germany and Arizona. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching and tuning in. Anything you want us to do, any content you'd like us to do and like to see, please just let us know. Any suggestions are great, and we'll do our best to accommodate any of them, whether it's in a recorded video or in a live session like this. If you like this, then we can do the same again with some of the fairway woods and the hybrid heads and iron heads down the line as well. I hope it's not just dull watching me hit drivers and talk, but do let us know. And say if you haven't already, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and we will look forward to seeing you next Friday.